Welcome to episode 37 of the Coast AFL Podcast, Winter Plays. This week, we are going to take a look at the Gold Coast Suns rebrand, and honestly, how much we don't like it, for the most part. We take a look at the fixture for the 2025 AFL men's season. We take a look at which teams double up against other teams, and we also look at the marquee matches and like a couple little tidbits of other matches that might seem pretty interesting. And then, of course, we cover the AFLW Semis, and we do a little preview on the preliminaries. So let's jump into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Pretty, what do you call it? Mellow week. Did go to a concert on Wednesday, which was very nice. Punk act called Jeff Rosenstock. Very good. And yeah, as I said, enjoyed the football on the weekend. It was one of those things where I was like a bit disappointed because I had a psych session on Saturday, halfway through the women's game for the Dockers in Adelaide, and I was like, oh well, if it's close, I'm going to be really annoyed. But I had a feeling that Adelaide were going to play them out, and sure enough, they did.
Sure enough.
So yeah, I also couldn't watch it too because I've still got my granddad hooked up to marquee accidentally. So I think we'd reached the maximum amount of screens. KO, if you're listening, I'm not trying to illegally do it. My granddad has an account. I just accidentally logged it into my account, and he just doesn't know how to change it. So yeah, I didn't get to watch it. I heard a bit on the radio, but I am keen to discuss that, and obviously the other match. What a game! And just talk about football because there's been a lot of news to drop this week.
There has. My week it's been kind of the same as usual. Lots of work. Finally got a bit of machinery fixed at work that has been plaguing us for months. So now that that's up and running, things are a lot smoother, which is great. It does mean a lot more kind of like heavier manual labor for me, which is fine. It keeps me busy instead of like standing around doing not all that much. Otherwise, yeah, it's just been a time. I'm still streaming a lot for my November campaign. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, still doing plenty of that up until pretty much the end of next week. So I'm sure we'll talk about that next week a little bit more anyway. All right, let's jump in to our first bit of news, which is the Gold Coast Suns rebrand and how ugly it is, because what were they thinking?
They want people to notice them.
Red on red.
I mean, they did. There was a lot of attention on the Suns for the last 3 days. We're not going to harp on too much about it because, like, a lot of people agree that it is pretty hard to see in terms of the logo on the kit, obviously. The away kit being a fair bit better, a very ugly pale shade of yellow, but I'm not a huge fan of yellow anyway. I guess yellow's all right before you have a go at me.
I think if they swapped it, I mean, we've kind of we had a bit of a discussion with this in our Discord with our friends. If they had swapped the yellow away logo onto the home, just so it stood out a little bit more rather than the red, as you can see here in the video, it would look so much better. But for some reason they didn't, and it doesn't stand out at all. It just looks like they're wearing just only red, and that's it. And it's just, why?
Yeah, it really is. And it's like, especially when you're coming from a rebound, because this is an important period, as we've mentioned, in the Suns franchise. I think, and we've been saying it for years, but I think the next year is almost, I don't want to say untenable if they don't make the finals, but it is
like a do or die season, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, you don't want it being your final jersey ever in the competition. Look, I don't think they're going to fold or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? It's just you sort of want like a breath of fresh air. Really, get the playing group. Not just for the men's and for the women's too, because the women's obviously a bit of a better club, so to speak, had a bit of an off year in the W, but they'll be looking to rebound because they did make the finals the year before. So yeah, as I said, in that case, very disappointing. But Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Also, I should mention the logo itself, the change to the S. I will briefly give some kudos because, like, I don't like the logo itself. Like, it doesn't do much for me.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that they were doing stuff with it. Like, it's in the shape of the footy, that's the obvious thing, but it's also in the shape of an S. It also sort of looks like a G and a C, if you
If you squint a little bit,
interpret
maybe.
it that way. Well, it's got the shapes of the G and the C because you
Yes.
can
Yeah, it
like
does.
the G's there because of the line through, the S is there because of the line through, um, and also it sort of looks like a sunrise and a sunset. So as I said, there were another logo floating around of like an old '90s tech company, which it sort of mimics, but
Mm.
yeah, I don't really think that it was like lifted off that. Like maybe the designer had seen it like once or twice in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So
And it's
but
like
yeah,
I had obviously like rebrands are a good thing. Like I had no qualms with them doing a rebrand. Like again, it had been 14 years since their introduction. It probably was time for them to kind of go up to the next level in terms of trying to create an identity for themselves. But I don't think this was it. I don't know what sort of like control group they got to get opinions for, or like if they did just a massive survey or something. They probably did surveys actually for that fact.
yeah. And
But
this is the weird thing. It's
I don't know.
like everyone unanimously said it's hard to see. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of what focus groups are for. You can go around saying, "Oh, focus groups makes everything so safe and it limits creativity or what yada yada yada." But this is just more, you know, looking because it's going to be impossible to see it on TV.
Mm.
But yeah, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, well, they've committed to it, so there's not much more that
Yeah,
that can be done, right? It's just
yeah.
oh
I don't
well,
know.
if
Like, I
if they're
guess
going
it
with it.
is. I guess the lack of yellow makes it a bit more intimidating. Like that's the only other thing I can really say positive for it because I have been trying to think of some things, not too in depth because I don't really care. But you know, I guess yeah, it looks a bit more intimidating maybe than that yellow and blue color. Um,
Of their away jersey, especially.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Um, I guess maybe a bit off track, but the one thing they could have rebranded, and I think we all agree. I'm not sure if we mentioned this when we're doing the quizzes. Um, But I had a little joke about doing a quiz with Blazey, and it was about remembering the Gold Coast Suns theme song. A
Oh
theme
yeah,
song,
yeah.
and
Like
yeah,
they
that's something that could have been rebranded.
well, they may have to change the lyrics to that because I'm pretty sure don't they have like red, blue, and yellow in the lyrics somewhere? Maybe I mean
No
I don't know.
idea.
None of us know it, but I'm pretty sure the colors
Honestly,
are mentioned.
I think I've even forgotten the first line.
We are
Um,
the sons of the Gold Coast sky.
oh, we are the Sons of the Gold Coast Sky, and Fight, Fight, Fight are the only two
Yeah,
I
that's
know.
all I remember.
Yeah. So, and you know, look, as I said, it's so weird because, like, of all the, there's a few clubs that I think should update their theme song, maybe. Um, I guess maybe only just the Eagles and the Suns, but yeah,
Well, I mean,
it's
yeah, because the Eagles changed theirs to a more modern version done by Birds of Tokyo, and people are still
yeah,
very 50-50 on that.
50/50 is
It
generous.
is generous, but I mean, I
Yeah,
I don't mind it.
look,
I think the old one is
look,
better,
as
but I don't mind it.
I, it's more just like, yeah, like Birds of Tokyo are just like one of those bands that are like in my head so 50/50. Like they can write good tunes, but I just never really been a fan of their songwriting. Um, but yeah, um, I, but yeah, as I said, for a modern theme song, yeah, it's just garbage. They had a chance to make it a bit more modern, but still be traditional. Like I said, the GWS one, like, I know the tradition of Richmond, and I'm not ever gonna like counterclaim someone claiming
Well,
to be
I was literally just
the
going to say
best
that there's a
in the
reason the
league.
top two theme songs is Richmond and GWS.
Yeah, and for the time, like when you realize that they recorded it then, and it still sounds so timeless, absolute banger.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then GWS like took a bit of that. It still fits in the league. It's still a chanting sports song.
Yeah, the big
Um,
sound goes hard.
the big sound exactly. But yeah, also it's just one of those things that's ridiculous because we're obviously Australians. Like, it's still insane to me that like AFL football is the only sport where you just randomly expect the players to sing a song after the game because they won. Like, I still don't think I found another sport that does it, and yet it's
Uh,
so
yeah,
ingrained.
I think some
Well, soccer has like
like I was
crowd chants, which is a bit different.
yeah, but I was thinking more like I think like Gaelic football might do it, but again, like AFL is partially
Yeah,
derived from Gaelic football. I think there might be some like like rugby union teams like up in Europe or something. I don't know. I know there are definitely other sports, other codes that do have the similar thing that we do that
yeah,
aren't in Australia, but I don't know what they are or where they are. Because I have seen videos
yeah.
of
That's
it, so
fair
I
enough.
know that it exists, but I just don't know where.
Yeah, but yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where it just seems so right for some reason. Uh, but yeah, um, but yeah, as I said, in terms of the rebrand,
It's
I would have actually liked to see that changed more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
well, I mean, the Gold Coast board agreed upon it. I guess any sort of management that had a say agreed upon it. Dimmer just has to deal with it if he's not happy with it.
I mean, it was sort of awkward, like seeing some of the players release because I think they definitely have mixed messages. Because I looked at some of the promos, or even something like I was watching. I don't know if you know Brendan Kelly from Auntie
Yes,
Donna,
yeah, I'm
the comedy
familiar.
group. But he's a big footy head. He's been doing some stuff with clubs, and he was actually doing an interview with I think John Noble and Mac Andrews. I think.
I know
And
John
yeah,
Noble
they were.
was one of the players that was like part of the marketing
Yeah,
for the jumper.
yeah. Because it was like that indoor area with like the potted plants and whatever. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to tell because like they could just be awkward. Like, I don't know how John Noble interviews. I think Mac Andrews is a bit half and half. He's enthusiastic, but I don't think he's quite um, media personality, so to speak. So we'll give him some credit there. But yeah, it just seemed a bit awkward. So
It's a
yeah,
little weird.
it just sucks that it's just such a representative of the club as a whole, where really like whether it's a good rebound or not is just up to people in offices. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
yet this
pretty
was
much.
such a Suns rebrand. Just yeah. Anyway, I hope they kill it next year because I feel like I've been talking way too much smack on them.
Well, yeah, well,
uh,
now that they've changed the rebrand, they now have to prove that they are worth the rebrand.
yeah, exactly.
All right,
Uh,
let's jump on to our next topic, which is the 2025 fixture was officially revealed earlier in the week. So we're going to start by just looking at the double ups that teams have. And it's ranked via top six, middle six, and bottom six per team. So we'll start with the very top of the graphic, which I have here. And it's essentially AFL.com.au's release of who each club plays twice. So we'll start with Brisbane, as this pretty much goes in order of the ending of the 2024 ladder. So Brisbane, they play Sydney twice, Geelong twice, and Hawthorn twice out of the top six. Western Bulldogs and Collingwood out of the middle six, and then the Gold Coast Suns in the bottom six. Thoughts?
yeah, as I said, I've briefly looked over it and I haven't done like a serious like ranking between them. But yeah, Brisbane looks to be the hardest. Not taking into account venues and all that, because again, I don't really get into that nitty gritty until later on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a pretty tough one. Obviously, I do actually think that Gold Coast might not be the hardest of the bottom six. Melbourne and Adelaide could be, although they finished lower.
Well,
apparently,
apparently,
Melbourne finished.
according to like Health Army and I think a couple of other people, Melbourne have equal easiest draw alongside Richmond next season, which is
Yeah.
really
It's
interesting.
it's just shows how much it can swing. Melbourne technically finishing in that bottom six, while St Kilda finishes one spot above, and you know technically those two sides, I still think Melbourne's better, but pretty much mirrored season, not much between it. St Kilda started awfully, came good at the end. Melbourne started fantastically, fell off like a house on fire, which I find ironically can be used to describe good or bad things.
True.
But yeah, exactly. So yeah, as I said, it's going to be a huge swing for them. But yeah, Brisbane, as I said, the only real bit of the schedule that's a bonus is, yeah, as I said, they got two bottom 8 teams technically, or bottom 9 teams, I should say. But one of them's really tough, and one of them we're just praying gets better next year.
Pretty much.
And probably should a bit, just to what degree.
Yeah.
And yeah, Sydney, Geelong, Hawthorn. I mean, not much needs to be said there.
No, they're definitely going to be some very interesting matches for sure.
Yeah, I would be surprised if, if 3 of those teams weren't in the top 5 come the end of the regular season.
Yeah, agreed.
At this point, anyway.
Next on the list is Sydney, of course. So they play Brisbane twice, as we just touched on. Port Adelaide twice. They've got the GWS Giants twice. Oh yeah, they do. Okay, that means I missed the Battle of the Bridge somewhere when I was doing preview work. Anyway, they play Freo twice, the Bombers twice, and North Melbourne twice. Thoughts?
Yeah, again, GWS twice. It's one of those things where it's probably actually an advantage, I guess, when you have your designated rival be so close to you on the ladder.
Yeah.
Because, those games you're playing at home, or at least in your own state, sorry. And one of them will be at home.
And to prove that how much fun that rivalry actually is, we only have to go back to the start of the finals. Because that first game between Sydney and GWS was electric.
Exactly, it's insane. Obviously, the most iconic one was GWS beating Sydney. It was like their first we're an actual side now win, I suppose. I still think they went 7 and something, but it was a very good win. The
battle has definitely evened the scores over the past couple of years as GWS has gotten better.
Yeah, and again, for a top side, they have to face Port Adelaide twice. Again, depending on how you view Port Adelaide, maybe a good or bad thing, but Port's had the edge over Sydney. So it's still a relatively tough schedule. It really depends how the Bombers go, because if the Bombers plat out, this could actually be a decent fixture for Sydney, but otherwise it's just relatively on par.
Yeah.
You would imagine.
All right, next on the agenda is Port Adelaide. So they play Sydney twice, which we just touched on, Geelong twice, Hawthorn twice, Carlton twice, Fremantle twice, and the Adelaide Crows twice.
Yeah, and I guess more specifically, because I've actually gone in depth, it's a very interesting fixture for Port Adelaide, because they've got a decent run at home at start, whereas the other half of the fixture has a very hard gauntlet of away matches. I think the Hawthorn, Geelong, Carlton and Freo, and the showdown, which obviously for the bottom 6 when it's your rival, is sort of the opposite of what I said before. When Adelaide can just pinch a game at any time, it sort of sucks for that to be your double up encounter. So again, arguably around the same as Brisbane in terms of scheduling, but they came second on the ladder. So yeah, it's relatively deserved. It's just going to be interesting to see that prove yourself run at the end, because they did finish last year strong with a pretty tough draw. But at the same time, it's sort of always weird, because you look at Port Adelaide, you get a bit down on them, but they just pull out some very excellent regular season performances.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one of the tougher draws that they've had in a while, so
fair enough.
Well, we think anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like it is one of the harder draws of the past couple of years. All right, to Geelong, where they play Brisbane twice, Port Adelaide twice, GWS twice, Essendon twice, St Kilda twice, and Richmond twice. Well, we struggle to beat Geelong. Currently, I don't expect us to get many wins next season anyway. I don't think any of us really expect Richmond to get many wins. The St Kilda matchup is interesting because St Kilda playing Geelong at Marvel, they've always made it extremely close. Whereas if they play it down in Geelong, Geelong kind of just run away with it. The Essendon matchup is neither here nor there. I don't think Essendon's ever really been able to keep up that much well with Geelong. Then obviously playing the 3 top 6 teams, being the reigning premiers, Port Adelaide and GWS, all have been really good matchups over the past couple of years. I expect them to be the same next season.
Yeah, and I sort of digged into this fixture a tiny bit, because obviously the big thing is they get 10 games at Goomba this year. 10 or 11?
It is 10 or 11.
But yeah, Geelong sort of get a bit of a short end of the straw because they face all but one of the teams that actually have a win, because only 6 teams have a win at Goomba, I think. And yeah, they face all of them. The only team that they don't is Sydney. And, you know, as I said, they face the couple of teams with an actual winning record over there, which is, what is it? It's GWS and the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so honestly, it's a bit of a, I wouldn't quite say it's monkey's paw because, you know, as I said, it's a small sample size anyway, because they don't normally get to play as much as I'd want to there. But, you know, as I said, it'll be one for Geelong where they might actually have a bit more, I would say, motivation to perform well at home. But, yeah, as I said, they'll be looking for a bit of revenge in some of these matches.
Yeah,
as a fan, it's absolutely great. And in terms of the double ups, is, you know, Essendon and St Kilda for the middle 6, you'd be pretty glad with that. Yeah. Richmond.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Alright, next on the list is GWS. Obviously, they play Sydney twice for their 2 clashes. They play Geelong twice, Western Bulldogs twice, St Kilda twice, the Suns twice, and the Eagles twice.
Yeah. So obviously it's not the top 4, as we discussed. This is off the basis of the finals fixture that determines who gets the triple top 6. So GWS, obviously, because they went out in straight sets, they don't have to play 3. They get the even spread, and yeah, it's pretty. I mean, as again, you take it, you know, one of those being your rivals, and the other one's Geelong, which GWS have the wood over. The Bulldogs, obviously, one of the best rivalries in the modern era. Well, at least probably the best rivalry for GWS anyway. And then the rest, you know, pretty straightforward. So I would say, you know, it's a probably slightly light for the Giants, considering they were top 4 last year. They'll be pretty happy with this fixture and the double headers. It should be something that hopefully opens up top 4 for them. Because, yeah, I think compared to the other teams around them, I would probably take the Giants fixtures in terms of as now. But as I said, you know, things can change. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Next on the list is Hawthorn. So they play Brisbane twice, Port Adelaide twice, Carlton twice, Collingwood twice, Melbourne twice, and the Crows twice. I think that's a fair matchup for them, actually. The Crows have shown that they can keep up with the top 8 teams. Granted, they had struggles, obviously, this season, partially with injury, and then they had some issues with restructuring as well. Melbourne, again, same sort of issue. Again, strong in the first half, fell off in the second. But we know that they have a great core and a great structure. Carlton and Collingwood, I think for the most part, they're basically traditional matchups. Like, you kind of expect Hawthorn to always go up twice against a Victorian rival. And then Port Adelaide and Brisbane are definitely the harder matchups because, again, top 4 teams. And Hawthorn, obviously, as we've seen, they now pretty much almost solidified themselves as a top 8 threat. But I don't think people are writing like this season off as just a fluke. I think they definitely have strong momentum and a strong core to keep playing as they did, especially now with their recruits in their backline, with Barras and Battle.
I think they'll be the Victorians' favourite for the flag.
Absolutely.
In terms of the AFL media.
Exactly where
they'll be roughing at the mouth for them. I don't think they will, but I definitely think there's some case for top 4, and at least, as you said, backing up a pretty solid season. But this will be a fairly tough matchup for them. Obviously, Carlton being, one of the tougher of the middle 6 pack, I think anyway. And Collingwood, who knows where they're going to be. I guess it depends how many goals Tim Membry kicks in the year, but as I said, not getting any of the easy bottom 6, if you like. But it is what it is. Relatively fair. Again, because they didn't beat Port Adelaide, it's one of those things that again could really change a fixture. You know what I mean? Like that extra top 6 clash, if they're in the top 4, could be the win that, or the lack of win that gets them a top 4 spot. We'll wait and see. That's why I say hard to maintain top 4, and it's why we always normally see a new team entering. As I said, they're pretty primed. They've probably done it as much as they can, and they haven't been shafted. So it'll be interesting to see if they can back it up, because I suspect they would.
Yeah, I agree. All right, next on the list is the Western Bulldogs, where they play Brisbane and GWS twice, Fremantle, Essendon and St Kilda twice, and North Melbourne twice. Again, part of that, traditional matchups, especially like St Kilda and North and Essendon, because they're also all co-tenants of Marvel Stadium. So they're also going to be just big crowd boosters for that. The Fremantle matchup, I believe, one they play here at Marvel, the other they play over there at Optus. And then the other one, Brisbane and the Giants, they're definitely going to be very interesting matchup. Because again,
are you sure the Fremantle one isn't at Mars Stadium for the Bulldogs?
Oh, it might be actually. I think the Giants one as well is also at Mars for that fact.
Yeah, I think they got a couple, but I thought it was Freo, but I might be wrong.
But yeah, I know they play a couple of games again in Ballarat. I think one of them is GWS. I'm pretty sure, because that team seems to happen every season now.
That's normally yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think the other one might be Freo. I can't remember. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some interesting matchups, because again, the doggies can be a bit flaky, as we've seen. Sometimes they just have a period where they're just suddenly out of form, but can come back hard, as they've always usually done the past couple of years somehow. By the will of the Bonds, it usually is.
Exactly.
Similar to Carlton, by the will of Patrick Cripps. But yeah, I think the doggies will definitely have their hands full in testing themselves with the matchup against Brisbane and GWS, and Freo as well, to be honest. But I think again, Essendon, St Kilda, North, currently they should deal with them pretty well, to be honest. But we'll see.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where because they get the triple middle 6 instead of having 2 bottom 6. But at the same time, Essendon, St Kilda, it's not. Theoretically, they could be around bottom 6. So as I said, but the Bulldogs have shown they don't often care about team form. They're just as likely to be the top 6 team as they are to lose to the Gold Coast, Essendon, all those middling teams. So the question is, as you mentioned, overall consistency. We saw them start slow last year. When we break down a bit more to the fixtures in terms of who they face at the start, when we go to preseason predictions, that might be interesting. But it's very hard to peg the Bulldogs this season, as you say. Like as said, they're probably going in a direction. Like they're either riding out this quote unquote premiership window, or eventually starting to rebuild as we see them lose a few players in the off season. But they've still got a lot of talent down there.
Yeah, agreed. Next on the list is Carlton. So they verse Port Adelaide and Hawthorn twice, Collingwood and Essendon twice, and then West Coast and North Melbourne twice. Again, traditional matchups for the most part. Pretty much all 4 Victorian teams that they're playing up against in one way or another, traditional matchup. But then the West Coast games and the Port Adelaide games are going to be a little bit more interesting, especially after how we've seen Carlton play over in the West at the latter half of the season. And then playing Port Adelaide at home. I think one is for Gather Round. and then the other I think will be at the MCG maybe, or is it Marvel?
No,
One of the two.
Can't play West Coast and gather round.
No, I mean Port Adelaide. Oh, yeah. No, yeah, sorry, you're right. They play West Coast in Gather Round, and then they go back at some point to play Port Adelaide.
I think they might stay there. This might be what you're thinking.
Possibly. But yeah, the matchup is definitely going to be very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think for Carlton, this is like one of the best theoretical fixtures you could probably get. They've done reasonably okay against Port Adelaide. There's always been pretty close games, so for top six, I'll be pretty confident there.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine the recent record against Hawthorn, but again, you got Victorian, and the weakest of the interstate teams, if you will. Interstate compared to Carlton, obviously.
Yes.
This is absolutely a really good fixture. I think they'll bounce back next year. They won't have, if they don't have as many injuries. I think they'll be, I don't think they'll be pushed. Well, they might be, I don't know. But yeah, as I said, I expect Carlton might be, a combination of good fixture plus, making up for a bit of bad luck of last season. So, it'll be one of those teams that, the middle six would hate to face twice.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, we'll wait and see to see where they're at. But yeah, I think this opens up a really good opportunity for Carlton to bounce back into the finals, or for a home final, which is probably where they're at.
Yeah,
Just
I agree.
Any home final,
pretty much. Right, next on the list is Collingwood. So they play Brisbane, Hawthorn, Carlton, Fremantle, Melbourne, and the Crows all twice. Again, the most part is traditional matchups, especially the Carlton one and the Melbourne one. Like, they have marquee games in that case. Brisbane would be a great test for them. Again, Brisbane being the reigning premiers. Same with Hawthorn. Freo games will also be a good test because Freo are basically on par as where they're at this point. In terms of like team structure and build stuff. And then Melbourne and the Crows could honestly still go 50-50 because, like, again, they're all kind of flaky teams. Melbourne, again, kind of fell off that second half. And, Collingwood have had struggle with forward structure as of late. So we'll see if, like, the recruitment of Tim Membry will help with that and the development of any other young players. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it's the exact same as the Hawthorn schedule. It's just they've subbed out Port Adelaide with Freo. Honestly, well, and obviously they play Hawthorn. They don't play Collingwood. Although, looking at their forward line, that was a bit of Collingwood v Collingwood. But it's a tough fixture. I mean, they play so many games at the MCG that, they will always make it up for it. But honestly, in terms of just pure playing twice sort of thing, this will probably be... I think I just had a rough gambit of this being the third hardest. Because I think I went through, I was like, it's probably Brisbane, Port, Collingwood, Hawthorn are like the hard ones, I'd say, out of all this, or what you would predict.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think I had Essendon, Carlton, gold. What was it? No, it was Melbourne. Melbourne have a pretty easy schedule.
Oh, yeah. We'll touch on that
probably whatever the bottom four is. But yeah.
All right, next on the list is Fremantle. So they play Sydney, Port Adelaide, the Western Bulldogs, Collingwood, St Kilda, and the West Coast Eagles, obviously, twice. The two derbies, of course. Again, as we saw this year, they could go either way because West Coast are known to actually get up for derbies. Otherwise, it's just going to be interesting matchups across the board because, again, Freo have been in this weird position where they can be in some great form, but then kind of just become a weird ramble if one of their forwards gets massively shut down. And that's going to be a massive test, especially for a lot of the defenses and their forward line going up against these teams.
Yeah, this is a real depth tester. And, as I said, in terms of, those matchups, in St Kilda, they've been I won't quite say they've been a bogey team, but historically they can be. I don't think they've won recently, but I can't quite remember. I know the last few years they have pinched wins off. And obviously they had that draw against Collingwood last year.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Freo? I can't remember. Yeah. So yeah, again, pretty tough, probably in the upper bits. But on the flip side, they should really want to challenge because, as I said, they're top. They're on field best 22 have definitely proven themselves to be of metal. So we will see, and I'll be enjoying, hopefully, going to a somewhat earlier Port Adelaide Fremantle game than I'm used to. Normally it's the last game of the season, but I think it's in the first third of the fixture. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll make myself down for that one at Optus Oval.
That would be very exciting. All right, next on the list is Essendon. Again, they play Sydney, Geelong, the Western Bulldogs, Carlton, Gold Coast Suns, and Richmond all twice. Again, traditional rivals for Carlton and Richmond matchups. Also marquee games, one of them being Dreamtime, of course. It's definitely going to be, again, like I'm just saying this for all teams, it's going to be a real test for all teams, regardless of matchups. But I think for Essendon especially, their defense is going to be massively tested against probably like the top 8, top 10 sort of teams. Against Gold Coast and Richmond, probably not so much, but especially against the likes of, the Carlton Doggies, the Cats. And
just put a thumb over the bottom 6.
Yeah,
as
pretty
I
much.
said, of all the teams to test, like the only one that they're not missing out on is Brisbane. Brisbane are another team that will absolutely dismantle a bad defense. And as we know, Essendon are looking to rebuild a bit in that area. Probably still rebuilding in general, but again, they did have that nice bit of last year, so maybe they can return back to that. But as I said, in terms of that, it's about, again, probably a slightly bit harder than, your position finish. I think there's teams around them with slightly easier ones, but again, they'll be looking to hopefully, just show what they're all about. Again, I don't think Essendon needs to make finals, but as we mentioned before, they, probably need a bit more identity, which they showed a bit last season. So we'll see.
Yeah, agreed. Next on the list is St Kilda. So they play the Cats, the Giants, the Doggies, Fremantle, Melbourne, and Richmond all twice. Unsurprisingly, they get Richmond twice, which is normally that happens every year that they play Richmond twice. But I think part of it was due to the old, Nick Riewoldt versus Jack Riewoldt kind of matchup, and now it's just kind of been a staple because they match up pretty well against each other most of the time. But if they're going and St Kilda and the Doggies have kind of just become traditional rivals in some degree because they play very similarly sometimes. Although Doggies do definitely match up more well against Carlton. But in saying that, I think St Kilda, this is definitely going to be the season where they need to they could prove themselves to be a threat, but it'll definitely also show where they still need work, especially on their forward line.
I think, I think it's more, and I know it sounds harsh, I actually think this of the Western Bulldogs too. It's it confirms whether they're rebuilding or not.
Yeah, pretty much.
Depending on how they do. You'll see it in the players as well. Because, the Saints have sort of shown shades of, effort. They had the big wins against Sydney. They had that other big win against Geelong, I think, late in the season.
They did.
So, again, pretty nice to at least get that matchup. But, honestly, again, pretty harsh fixture, really. Two of the better middle 6 teams. Melbourne as your bottom 6 team. But, again, Melbourne team, they'll get a lot of games in Melbourne. Obviously.
Yeah, they'll play most of the games at Marvel as is their home. I don't think they actually have many games at the MCG. I think maybe one of the Richmond games is at the MCG. I don't know if both matchups are. But yeah,
I would have thought the bottom 6 ones would have been 2Gs.
The one against Melbourne's I think definitely the MCG because I think it's a Melbourne home game, at least for one of them anyway.
It'd be a bit harsh if you got back-to-back away games.
Well, that's
But
what happened last
um,
season when St Kilda played Richmond, because they played Richmond in gather round, and then they played them again later in the
yeah,
season,
well,
and they were both classified as Richmond home games, which
I
is
yeah, I guess, but yeah, it has happened before due to scheduling and whatnot by the AFL. So
yeah, it's
St Kilda's always been a bit of the yeah, sort of along with the Western Bulldogs, sometimes Geelong as being like the butt monkeys of the Victorian teams, just sort of getting what's left over.
although
North now in that category.
Geelong's consistency to, for the most part, always play finals has definitely helped them in that favor to stand out a lot more for the AFL.
Oh yeah. As I said, it's just one of those things where it's like, man, imagine that Geelong dynasty if they had home games in finals at Goomba more regularly.
Yeah, but
Only Freo's
grand
been
finals
able to
aren't
stop
played in
them there.
Geelong, are they?
Yeah, well, I guess so.
All right, next on the agenda is the Gold Coast Suns. So they play Brisbane, GWS, Essendon, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Richmond all twice. Again, the Gold Coast Suns Richmond matchup's kind of just become a traditional sort of rival at this point because of how often they match up against each other fairly well. Um, Not to mention, the whole Dimmer rivalry now that exists that they tried to play into an opening round last year. Um, Again, Brisbane because it's a Q clash. So
Yeah,
that's perfectly fine.
again,
That's a
you
ton of
normally put
sense.
it towards Brisbane, but if it's an awful day in Queensland, an absolute slime bowl in the heat, there is a chance that game could be just close by conditions. So again, that probably favors Gold Coast a lot more, even though it's not the greatest.
The Giants double matchup also makes sense. They've basically become rivals
Expansion,
because they're
yeah.
expansion clubs. And then Essendon, Melbourne, and Adelaide definitely going to be real tests for them. Just in terms of like where they sit in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's not a hard fixture, but it probably is reflective of where they actually are. Like this is probably the most even, or one of the more even fixturings you can get for a team that's just the best of the bottom six, quote unquote.
Pretty much.
At least on last year's letter.
Next is Melbourne, so they play Hawthorn twice. Collingwood, St Kilda, the Suns, the Eagles, and North Melbourne all twice. Again, traditional matchup for Melbourne and Hawthorn. And then St Kilda, the Suns, the Roos, and the Eagles are kind of just here or there. It'll be a test for them to see if they're structured back to where they should be, or if they're still going to really struggle throughout this year.
But this is like a huge opportunity. Again, it's hard because you think of Hawthorn as top four, but again, in terms of this fixture, it's technically them facing the weakest of the top six teams. And, Collingwood, St Kilda, and, as I said, so, sorry, of all the teams that they're not playing in the bottom six, the rest are Melbourne-based teams.
Yes.
So, again, it's a real big chance to prove, because, again, Melbourne were 7-3. Well, no, it wasn't 7-3. It was good, though.
Yeah, there was a high score up until they lost Petrarca and started falling apart in the middle.
Yeah. And look, they have problems, like their forward line's arse, but unlike
true.
Unlike Collingwood, I could actually see a bit more cohesiveness this year, especially, as I said, if they get their midfield back on track. Again, the other one being Clayton Oliver, will he get back to form?
Well,
there'll be question marks when we go into
not
the
that he
season,
needed to. He started training early this season. He went back with the 1-4s, which shows he's at least committed to making amends still and getting back to his best.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's like, it's always hard when you think of attitude, because it's like there's stuff you can infer from off-season stuff, but I don't know Clayton Oliver personally, you know what I mean? So it's like, you just hope that he does what he needs to do, because his form is beautiful when it's on, and it will be a huge thing of getting Melbourne back on track. So they've got an opportunity. I think, again, they could be a club to rise up, but as I said, on the flip side, that's why I keep on saying for the other bottom 16, for the other double up teams that get Melbourne, I think they've sort of drawn the short straw in terms of a bottom six opponent. Because, Like Adelaide's got potential to rise, but I don't expect Melbourne to rise a bit more.
Yeah, agreed. All right, next on the list is the Adelaide Crows. So they play Port Adelaide twice. Obviously, the showdowns, massive, massive marquee games. Hawthorn, Collingwood, the Suns, the Eagles, and the Roos all twice. Again, it's going to be definitely a limit test for them. Not even just against the bottom 6 teams, but against Collingwood and even against Hawthorn. Again, for the showdown games, they always seem to get up and play them very close. Because it's always an extra bit of energy that you get from big marquee games. Whereas if you just play a game in a regular sort of season game, it's a different energy. So honestly, these sorts of matchups are definitely all limit tests and definitely could prove that last year, where they had their structure issues and injury issues and suspension issues for a couple players, that they do belong where they should have belonged in 2023, and that's fighting for a top 8 spot and proving that they they should belong there.
And the other thing too is, again, with the other bottom 6 teams, you've got garbage defense. Oh, okay, Gold Coast.
Gold Coast is getting better. They've had their moments.
Yeah, I think Gold Coast have, it's not as much of a back 6 as it is systematic, but yeah. Anyway, what I'm talking about is Adelaide. Even last year, we saw occasionally on weaker defenses, especially in the back half, that they really ramp up scoring. There's a bit of optimism there. Obviously, they have an extra top 6 if you really count that, because of the Port Adelaide thing. But again, as I said, they only have to face one middle 6, so it's not much to say about it, really. It's just as you say, a bit of a litmus test. We'll see how they go. But I think they'll improve next year. But again, we'll go a bit more into detail when we go through the previews next year.
Great. Next on the list is West Coast. So they take the Giants twice, Carlton and Freo twice. Obviously, Freo because of the derbies. And then Melbourne, Adelaide, and Richmond twice as well. There's not really much to say for West Coast. You just hope that there is some kind of improvement from them. You don't want to really see them still slumped in the bottom 4, but that's neither here nor there. Again, they have a new coach now. They've got new assistant coaches. There's going to be a new game plan. And they're probably still...
They're not going to rise.
I don't think they're going to rise, but you'd like to at least hope that they find something better than where they currently are at.
Yeah, but if you look at the schedule versus where they're at, this is tough. Honestly, getting that, again, Melbourne and Adelaide head to head, and as I said, North Melbourne had this as well. They really wanted to face each other, but I think West Coast sort of gets soft locked with Adelaide because it's not an official thing, but normally Port Adelaide, Freo, West Coast, and Adelaide have some sort of pairing together where they'll play, Adelaide v Perth sort of matchup.
Yeah, it's
obviously
it helps them minimize travel and costs.
Yeah, and this year, obviously, it makes sense that, Port Adelaide face Freo twice. But unfortunately for West Coast, they face Adelaide twice, which still makes a lot of sense. But geez, as I said, I think they'd rather be facing North Melbourne or Gold Coast.
Yeah, agreed.
That's my opinion. Yeah.
Next is North Melbourne. So they play Sydney twice, the Doggies and Carlton twice, and then also Melbourne, the Adelaide Crows, and Richmond. I will mention this. I'll go into a little bit more detail into this a bit later on. But one of the North Melbourne Richmond games is played in Hobart in Tasmania, which is a place that Richmond has not played in the AFL era. This is the very first time they'll be playing an official AFL game in Hobart, which is very exciting. Something that was officially I may as well touch on this now. Something that was officially announced by the club when the fixture was revealed is that apart from the ACT, because we don't play the Giants there, and Northern Territory, we play a game in every major AFL state this season, or every AFL state that has a team, so thus including Tasmania. which is actually crazy to think about because I don't think it's ever been. That definitely hasn't been a thing in our history. Again, because we've never played in Tassie.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and as I said, it is absolutely insane when you compare it to, some of the fixtures that GWS have had to go through in their not ascendancy years, because it was only as much as a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Where they won. No, it was last year they won in every state, didn't they?
Yes, it was last year.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, like 12 different grounds with a win. So yeah, as I said, other teams will be like, yeah, join the club, but yeah, no, as I said, it'll be a bit of a test for Richmond. Oh, sorry, yeah, it'll be a test for
It'll be a test for Richmond.
I forgot what we were talking.
North Melbourne.
I forgot we were talking about North. Yeah.
Again, it's interesting for them because they've recruited a bunch
of their doubleheader.
Yeah, and the fact that they've recruited a bunch of veteran talent to help grow and help develop leadership skills in their rookies. I think that's predominantly what they're thinking with all of the veteran talent that they've gained. I don't think they're entirely. Obviously, they're all focused on climbing the ladder, and winning games.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely more so developing leadership skills on field and better structure with the younger players, especially because again, these veteran players are only going to be around for like a couple of years. It's not for some of them only 1 or 2. So it's just about developing the younger players a bit more and finding more leadership voices and helping that better structure. And hopefully, Clarko and his coaching staff are going to be able to get the most out of this squad, at least to try and pull them out of bottom 4.
Yeah, and as I said, it's going to be tough this year. But again, you never really know what the team throws. The season throws at you. You never know when you're facing teams in terms of injuries or that sort of stuff. So, yeah, as I said, it doesn't look great. Like I'd say, North Melbourne and West Coast are probably the 2 worst fixtures of the whole bottom 6, which is sort of a bit tough considering they're both. There's a bit of a chasm between Adelaide and West Coast downwards. So
yeah,
it's going to be rough. They lost, yeah. So, but as I said, yeah. Again, there's still plenty of Melbourne-based matchups, so they got that to look forward to. And
not to mention they have those 2 games sold to WA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so that's whether that massively affects
who knows? They might be Bunbury Kings.
Yeah, who
knows? West Coast haven't won a game in Bunbury, fun fact.
Have Fremantle for that fact? Really? I'm testing your knowledge here just for why not?
Well, I know they've never played an AFL game in Bunbury. I don't know whether they've when Fremantle were sort of. Oh wait, no, they went straight into the league, so yeah, they wouldn't have.
Well, there you go.
Depending if you count Peel. I think Peel's played games in Bunbury before.
50-50 or whether that counts. All right.
Peel obviously being Freo's waffle.
Yes.
Affiliate.
Yeah. All right, and then finally on the list is Richmond. So we faced Geelong twice, which isn't surprising because we seem to have become traditional rivals to Geelong. I don't know why, but it's just always been an interesting matchup. I think especially because of the premiership years and how well they matched up when we were really good. And then obviously Essendon and St Kilda, which have again just become traditional rivals. Same with the matchup against the Suns; it's become a traditional rivalry at this point. But then West Coast and North Melbourne, that's probably the easiest matchup that we've got. Apart from the fact that they're also slumped down to the bottom 4 with us. But I think that it's especially North. I think North Melbourne is going to be the harder test than West Coast. And that's purely because of, that veteran talent and the fact that, we're going to have a bunch of new talent in from the draft. We still have a bunch of young kids we're still developing. I don't know what our injury list is going to look like. Whether we have our key ACL injured players back, whether we...
Yeah, you can imagine a few of those wouldn't be available for the
forward line, because, that's a big question. Whether we have our backline finally solidified again, because I would love Gibcus to come back, please. I'm begging. But yeah, I don't expect us to really climb too high. Getting out of bottom four would be nice. But again,
Mm.
because we're going through an entire restructure still, especially with the upcoming draft, which we will talk about. That happens this weekend, so looking forward to that. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I know
it's
this is a bit early, but like
very
I
interesting.
think considering last year and how close some of those games were,
Oh yeah, like
and now with
we
the
could
easier
prove
fixture,
that we can keep up. We just always ran out of legs, so we were such a young
yeah,
side.
yeah, I reckon like 5 wins is probably a good optimistic one. I don't think you'll get much more than that. But I think that's also like a very good benchmark, really.
Mm.
Especially given your fixture. I can definitely see. Honestly, you could go back to back on one of the bottom sixes. I imagine most of them will be one each, and then it's just like another win somewhere. So, yeah, that's relatively.
Hey,
I don't won't exactly play out like that, but
I still plan on being
yeah,
at most of the
I'll be
games,
hopeful.
so I will be cheering them on as hard as I can, win or lose.
Yeah, it's always good to get back to your team in a rebuild.
As long as
I know I never really got to.
as long as most games are at the MCG, the handful of ones that will be at Marvel, I'll go to if I have time.
Mm,
But yeah, I'm looking forward to the season. All right, let's jump over to opening round and the other games throughout the season that we kind of want to just touch on. So we'll start with opening round because we didn't get to talk about that last week. So Brisbane and Geelong start the season Thursday, March 6th, up at the Gabba again. So if you're unfamiliar with opening round, if you weren't aware of what happened this season, it's 4 games of footy, 8 teams, all localized up in the NRL states, so New South Wales and Queensland, just to try and promote the game a bit more and grow the game a bit more in that region. Um, to be honest, we're not really fans of it. None of us, like all the people that we've talked to, are very here nor there for the most part. There, in
yeah.
regards to it
Again, not
kind of
so much
existing.
in New South Wales. Like if they decided to have gather round in New South Wales round one, fantastic. I'd be all
Yeah, like
for it.
we all kind of agree that like a traveling
It's
gather
the
round is a better
split.
idea than an
Yeah.
opening round and a gather round, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
But
But yeah, it's just that split the fixture creates. I don't think it was that great last year. Sample size of one, so you can't really say, oh, that's the reason why X amount of teams had slow starts. But there definitely could be an argument. There was a few teams that were like fast running teams that were a bit favored at the start of the season that sort of slowed down, as well as just some teams, had to play a game and then have a bye week in like 2 weeks.
yeah,
So it's just hard to like start a season. You get your body right, you get that conditioning, and then you have to rest in round three. It's just
yeah,
so
it's weird, and I don't like it. But it's
no,
here, so we have to deal with it. So we'll start by just briefly talking about these 4 games. So Brisbane and Geelong start off the season Thursday, March 6th, as I said before, at the Gabba. Again, this will be a banger of a match. Again,
hmm,
top 8 matchup. Reigning premiers get to unfurl
yeah,
their flag at home straight off the bat, which is massive for them. Yeah, there isn't. I mean,
yeah,
it'll be a good test to see how Geelong have structured. Because like we've seen, like players like Shannon Neal take up the Tom Hawkins role. Jeremy Cameron still
hmm,
surprisingly looking fit and able to kick a brilliant amount of goals. So it'll see how like Zach Tui's retirement, for example, really kind of plays into where they're
yeah,
structured. Granted, he was kind of leaning off towards the end of the season anyway, just because of his age. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it'll be a fun watch. It'll be a fun watch.
And you gotta remember too, like Brisbane have a few players coming back as well. Like as you said, like Logan Morris would be the counterpart to Shannon Neal, who had such a fantastic last half of the season being a rookie. But you have people like Charlie Cameron, not Charlie Cameron, Kitty Coleman,
Yes.
who theoretically, in terms of ACL timeline, should be back unless it's like a setback or something that we don't know about. Um, Oh, it was the other ACL too. Um,
Um,
oh,
Oh,
The
they
defending
had four.
Gardner.
Yeah, they had
Yeah,
Gardner.
they
They
had
had
Gardner,
McCarthy.
McCarthy, Link. Well, they're so good in the forward line. It's amazing that they replaced him. Like, beggars belief that
Again,
final
Logan Morris was
run.
like a massive massive wonder that they found him in the VFL.
Yeah, well, I guess Archie sort of like that, like to like in terms of Kitty, but in terms of overall production of that forward line, they were having to replace Charlie Cameron too, not having the greatest goal scoring year.
Yeah, and as
You
we
know,
saw with the grand final, he was the quietest player on field for Brisbane, which is crazy.
yeah. So Brisbane, no problems finding avenue to scoreboard. So as I said, it'll be interesting to see the teams that are trotted out. I think, yeah, as I said, the thing is, there's never been a premiership side that's played together and been around the next season. That's confirmed this year again with the Jay Danaher retirement. So, yeah. I mean, it's one of those stats you think's insane, but when you think about it, a lot of players choose to retire after a premiership as well. So you lose a bit of the old guard in terms of that. So,
yeah,
yeah, as I said, look, all these are great matchups. Like, we're not complaining about this, but yeah, I think this one too. It should be good, but again, early part of the season, especially at the Gabba as well, while it's still warm. That's the only reserve I have of this bit. Like, it's a bit.
yeah. That's
Sometimes I like seeing this
especially in
matchup
Queensland,
in
it's
like,
still very
yeah,
rough weather.
I'd want this in like week 5. You know what I mean? Like, but as I said, they do have some schedule ones later on, so we'll just be happy that yeah, it's a pretty good opening game of football.
Pretty much. Next on the list is Friday, March 7th at the SCG, Sydney v Hawthorn. Again, another banger of a matchup. Great test for Hawthorn to show that they're still the same side that finished the 2024 season. For Sydney, it's whether they can prove to bounce back strongly after the rough ending that they had to the season in the grand final.
Yeah.
Granted, obviously, it's not the same side that played in that grand final because a couple of players have moved on to other teams or have retired. So that'll be very interesting to see what their kind of lineup looks like. And yeah, I think the Hawthorn, I think, should come out like amazingly well. Especially again, as we mentioned earlier, Hawthorn's recruited defense players in Battle and Barras. So I think it's going to be a really, really fun matchup.
Yeah, and obviously, like, I think teams defensively recruitment, I think it's understated. Like, often you see a team that recruit like a key forward and it takes a while to slot in, where defense is so systematic, where I'm not saying it doesn't have its issues, because obviously sometimes you have to play slightly different roles. But yeah, as I said, for Hawthorn, as I said, their defense gets even better. Plus, defense is normally king in the first few rounds because scoring's harder. So yeah, this is like a real good opportunity for Hawthorn to get a scalp. We'll talk more about it next year, but for now, this is just going to be, I think the more prayful bird might be looking for a bit of an early scalp there.
Agreed. Next is the Saturday, March 8th game at People First Stadium on the Gold Coast, being the Gold Coast Suns and Essendon. A great litmus test for both clubs, seeing as how they're both fairly evenly matched structurally wise. Essendon will be more so tested on their defense, and Suns more so probably on their offense. But both midfield squads will definitely have a fun romp against each other.
Yeah, exactly. They like to play a bit fast and loose. They're not that contested, or at least they put pressure on different ways, but they normally let each other run. So unless anything changes too much, yeah, as I said, it will be much of a pretty free-flowing game and probably a good one. Like, sometimes you look at this matchup and you think, two mid-ish teams, it's not that exciting. But often these sort of contests early can be fairly entertaining before, as I said, defense tends to, well, I won't say lock in, because again, it's sort of opposite when you're talking about top teams. Because normally, the mid teams, the ones with a bit to prove over the off season, they try a bit harder to kick away, try and create score and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, not the top team, they know what it's about. They know they can trust themselves to generate score. They don't need to be as, they'll let the game be defensive if it has to.
Yeah.
Whereas I can't see this happening with the Gold Coast and the Dons.
Yeah, exactly right. And then the last on the list is Sunday, March 9th game at NG Stadium in Sydney. Obviously, the GWS Giants playing Collingwood. This has kind of become, I wouldn't say it's a traditional matchup, but it's become a mini rivalry that's been very interesting to watch.
Yeah. The
The
finals
Giants
matches.
obviously gaining Jake Stringer from Essendon.
Yeah.
Collingwood obviously recruiting a couple of players of their own to help with their forward structure, Tim Membry being one of them. But I think this is going to be another midfield battle, and especially to see if Toby Bedford plays. And actually, was he a suspended player from their off-season antics? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay,
Was he?
he was either
No, I think he
suspended or
got traded.
fined. He was one of the two. I know that much.
Did Bedford get traded to Adelaide?
Did he?
Or am I thinking of the other one? No, I'm thinking Perryman.
You're thinking,
No,
yeah, you are thinking of Perriman.
I
Perriman
don't
was
know.
traded.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no,
I can't
there's
remember.
another.
Anyway, because of the Giants
I gotta look
off-season
it up.
antics, I can't remember if he was suspended or fined. So either way, if he does play, it'll be interesting to see who he tags in the Collingwood midfield. If he doesn't play, then I think either way it's going to be a very interesting midfield matchup predominantly, especially with the the Dacos boys and doing what they do. See if players like DeGoey as well are fully fit and actually going to play a full season. I think, and whether I want to see what the Giants forward line has to offer, because I'm still not very happy with a couple of their players. Main one being Riccardi. I've kind of never really liked him, still don't. But I'm very impressed with Aaron Cadman and how he improved last season over the course of last season. And I think him, Hogan, and Stringer all will formulate a very, very strong marking forward line.
Yeah, and I think the thing with like Stringer, it's sort of weird because there's like some parallels to like last year with the expectation on Schultz to Collingwood.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing and the difference obviously as well with Essendon is that, you can up Riccardi all you like, and as I said, I'm not that bad on him, but it's still a below average top forward. I still maintain that a below average top forward is still like good in terms of structure, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But it brings the ball to the ground. It puts a lot less pressure on Stringer. So Stringer can just do what he wants.
Exactly. Like Stringer was mostly brought in to help alleviate the pressure on Hogan, because Hogan was basically their only key marking forward.
And they've got other distributors, because the problem is like Stringer disappears a bit too much to be a consistent distributor.
Yeah.
Which put a lot of pressure on some of the other, you got Guelphy and all that, but we're not going to analyze this.
And on the other hand, is that like him and Green are able to like swap rotations because they could both play mid forward.
Yeah, exactly. And
so like if Toby Green wants to play up more forward line, he can do that, and Stringer can go into the midfield, or vice versa, which is like very good for Kingsley and how he wants to like structure his team. But yeah, I think just overall it's going to be a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, it's thinking the opposite will happen. I think actually it'll be a bit more permanent. I think Stringer will stay deeper. No, I think
Green probably like his age probably does have a factor in that as well. Like Toby Green is the younger player.
Just.
It's like only by a year or two, but
yeah. But yeah, anyway. Again, we'll go into the nitty-gritty then. But yeah, again, 2 teams with history. Some interesting movements. Obviously, the one you hurt me not to mention, Dan Houston to Collingwood, of course.
No, I'm kidding. Dan Houston to Collingwood is a massive move. And it's going to be insane to watch him off their halfback.
Yeah, especially when GWS was mucking around at times with their forward entries, with how much talent they had in the forward line. So Collingwood at least have an avenue. And, we mentioned last year their forward line's not that great. This year it might not be, but, that Houston Houston, he generates a lot of scores. He can find some fast rebounds, which is how Collingwood got a lot of their scores.
Yeah.
So, it might be a battle of movement, actually. We have the Orange Tsunami versus the Collingwood, swoops.
Oh, Magpies do swoop, so I guess it's probably close enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the traditional round one games. Starting off, obviously, just for context, we're not going to go through every single round. That's going to take too long.
Yeah.
We're just mostly highlighting opening round, round one, and then like marquee games and any other smaller games that we thought would be interesting. So now we're on round one. Start with the traditional round one matchup of Richmond v Carlton, the MCG Thursday night game. I'm glad that it stayed, as I know some
The lights on the fixture.
I know some people aren't fans of it because, as well, one, because Richmond's form just isn't great at the moment, and you'd want to see something else. Um, and two, like you probably want to put Thursday night as like a different sort of marquee game for once. But no, I'm glad it stayed. I'm glad it's a Richmond home game because I'm definitely excited to go. Um, but yeah, I don't see. I just want to see what we look like. That's plain and simple. I just want to see what we look like, what players are going to be available, and just how we match up against a team like Carlton. Because obviously Carlton, top eight team, or I wouldn't say consistent top eight team, but always fighting for top eight. Again, they only barely made it in this season.
Mm.
But
Actually,
they're a
the
good
funny
test
thing.
to start with because do we match up
Yeah.
well? We've always kind of match up well structurally. Again, big marquee game for round one, so there's always a lot of energy around it. Whether we get stomped, whether win, lose, whatever, I'm just looking forward to seeing what we look like and what our game plan is going to start to develop as the season goes on.
Yeah, because I was gonna say it's like almost the opposite of like the Bolton Teague era, where Carlton sort of use this game as just like a test up against a very decent Richmond side to see if they can at least have, the inklings of a good plan. Some seasons they got close and then they were like, oh, Carlton might not be that bad, and then more so in the Bolton era it was just. But yeah, as I said, I got more faith in Uze than what last year gave. So, I do think that if Richmond can build off what they were doing last year, yeah, that should translate into even this matchup. Even as you say, if they don't get all their players back, because some will miss a bit of the, A, off season, and B, maybe some of the early rounds too.
Yeah, it's just a wait and see on our injury list at this point in time, which is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Like I just want our players to be 100% fit and ready to go. All right, next is the Friday night game at the MCG as well. Hawthorn v Essendon. Probably another banger of a match, to be honest. Again, another great test for Hawthorn after just traveling to Sydney. I think Hawthorn should win that like perfectly fine. But again, we don't know what Essendon are going to look like. We don't know what Hawthorn are going to look like. Just purely based on what we've
Yeah.
seen at the end of this season, just gone. Hawthorn should have a fun match on their hands.
Yeah, I would actually say that Hawthorn might, put the early. I think this is one of those things where, again, I haven't like gone through, but Hawthorn early season have like the opportunity to be the early bookies' favorite for the flag, I think.
Especially if
I
they're
think
able to
they'll get off
carry
to a bit of a
on
hot start.
the same sort of energy and momentum that they had at the end of this season, just gone.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, I think Essendon will be, I think it's just more interesting to see what they put out in the park. But yeah, I think most people will be expecting Hawthorn. But again, I'm not going to be putting my chips in it. The 18th of
November.
the month before December. Yeah. So,
All right, and then
yeah.
the Saturday, March 15 games, we've got Geelong and Freo down in Geelong. So always seems to be an interesting matchup. Again, it's well known that Freo play very well in Geelong.
Yes, one of the two teams with a positive record.
Yeah. So that'll be a fun game to watch. Nick, I'm kind of just going to quickly rattle through these. I don't think we really have to say too much
we don't
about
need
them.
it. Yeah.
The grand final rematch at the SCG. Well, it's not really technically a rematch because it's not on the MCG, but Sydney and Brisbane at the SCG. That's going to be a banger of a match, I think. One to see how Sydney have bounced back, and then Brisbane to see whether they've been able to not just maybe pull out a couple of rookies from out of their hats, especially if they get Levi Ashcroft, which we know that they will.
Yeah.
But also like with with like Coleman coming back, hopefully, like Gardner. Anyone else that they've lost? I've already blanked on the one that I mentioned before.
There is another
McCarthy.
one up. Yeah, McCarthy. Yeah.
And then like Sydney to see how they've restructured after losing a couple of players, and kind of fixed up some of their issues. Hopefully, it would be very, very interesting to see.
If we go to some of the storyline of last year, it could be like a bit of an danger game for Sydney. You know, like how Collingwood and Brisbane look to be not even close to making the finals. Obviously, the premiers the year before. Sorry, the grand final matchup the year before. Sydney had pretty tough games to start. So, yeah, there'll be some narratives. There will be some narratives.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of a traditional matchup to start round one is the Doggies and North at Marvel Stadium. First game at Marvel Stadium for the season. Again, it'll just be a good litmus test for kind of both teams at that point in time. Doggies especially because, again, they should be like a strong top 8 team. But again, they're kind of a lot more flaky than some of the other teams sitting in the middle.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good test for them. North, just to see how they go with their veteran talent and whether like they've made some massive structural changes or whether they're just, you know, taking it easy, like doing step by step, seeing how they develop, that sort of thing. Collingwood and Port Adelaide at the MCG. That'll be a banger of a matchup. I'll let you kind of go with that one.
Yeah, obviously Port Adelaide got absolutely spanked by Collingwood after what was an okay first half. But yeah, as I said, they fell off very quickly when Collingwood were thinking of getting momentum back. And obviously just, I guess, the prison bar jerseys makes it a bit of a rock. I don't know, but
we can call it the Dan Houston Cup now if you want.
Yeah, well, I guess, as I said, I don't know if too many fans are like angry at Dan Houston. A few will be. But yeah, as I said,
is he even playing? Isn't he not still suspended?
Oh yeah, he is too. What a rip! What a
He's not even gonna get played.
Oh no, yeah, because it was 3 games. They've got opening, and then this will be the last.
It's 5 games overall. So yeah, he'll miss this one as well.
Yeah. Oh well.
That's unlucky timing.
Oh, it's good for Port. Hey, we know there's an All-Australian not playing for Collingwood, so...
True.
Yeah. Look, as I said, I don't think too many people are... there might be a few... No, we didn't get any Collingwood players. We did get Joe Richards.
Yes, right. You did get Richards, that's right.
Maybe Richards will get booed. I don't know.
I doubt it. He was a pretty massive fringe player. It's fine.
Yeah. Again, still pretty popular with the Collingwood fans.
True.
Hopefully he'll get a bit of love.
All right. Next are the Sunday, March 16 round 1 games. So Adelaide and St Kilda at the Adelaide Oval. Again, this will be a strong litmus test for both teams. Just to see where they've matched up, where they've rebuilt, just how their kind of structure is seemingly to go. Again, like North, are they just going to be taking it one step at a time? Or have they managed to solve most of their issues in the off-season? That's a wait and see.
And again, a team that's like looking to pride itself on its offense versus a team that's normally built around its defense. So,
although until they're losing Josh Battle, that might be a little bit more of an issue.
They're systematic; they'll be fine.
True.
Although we're St Kilda, that's never that fine. But
well, you just gotta hope that Jimmy Webster doesn't knock Jai Simpkin out again in the preseason.
Maybe. We'll see.
Next on the list is Melbourne and the Giants at the MCG. Sunday afternoon twilight game. Again, probably pretty much a litmus test for both teams again. Melbourne to see if they've managed to bounce back off their form slump at this second half of the season. Giants as to whether they're able to recover mentally from going out in straight sets in the finals.
Probably the worst time to face Melbourne too, when again offense isn't quite at its peak yet. Which definitely plays into Melbourne's hand, being a more defensive oriented team. So, be tough for the Giants.
And then just a special treat for us: the first coast to coast game is in round 1 between the Eagles and the Suns over at Optus. That's Again, it's just a litmus test for both teams. Suns should be pretty warm after playing the opening round. West Coast, they'll just be seeing how they've been able to restructure under Mini, their new coach, and of course, new assistant coaches to help them out as well. A couple of new players as well. So they've got Jack Graham from Richmond. They've got Liam Baker as well. I think they've picked up a couple of other players, and they'll probably pick up. Yes, that's right. And they'll probably obviously dip into the draft too. And hopefully, on the injury front, they're able to get most of their players back that have been lost to injury. It'll be good to see how their forward line structures. Now that hopefully Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman have had more time to at least play together. Now that one or the other isn't injured. So that'll be a fun matchup, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And again, early in the season, you get a few surprise wins. Like most people would think on paper, the Suns might be a bit better, but as we saw last year, they didn't quite like exiting their state, But yeah, you should think that, I guess it's a bit different. Obviously Queensland's a bit more humid, Perth's a bit more dry, but, I sort of find it funny that it said that Suns have warmed up, because I think any team playing in Queensland or any team playing in Perth probably are warm.
True, it is warm temperatures on both sides of the country in March. Very, very true.
Autumns don't tend to dip off too much.
All right, next we'll just briefly touch on round 5, which is gather round. Obviously, we did talk in depth about it last week, so I'm just going to quickly rerun down through all of the games. So to open gather round, it's Adelaide and Geelong at the Adelaide Oval. Then we've got Collingwood and Sydney at the Adelaide Oval, North Melbourne and the Suns in the Barossa Valley, Carlton and the West Coast Eagles at Adelaide Oval, the Western Bulldogs and Brisbane at Norwood Oval. Honestly, I feel like that game should have been at the Adelaide Oval, just because Brisbane are the reigning premiers, but it's here nor there. Melbourne and Essendon at the Adelaide Oval, and then Richmond and Fremantle at the Barossa Valley, St Kilda and the Giants at Norwood Oval, and to close out the round, it's Port Adelaide and Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval, which will be a banger of a game.
Bangers all around. Get the mash out.
And then round 6 is actually the Easter long weekend. So, the 2 games that I want to highlight here are the Friday games, because they're the Good Friday appeal games between North Melbourne and Carlton and West Coast and Essendon. I think these will be very, obviously, we're now going later into the season where we don't really know anything anyway, but I think these will be very interesting matchups, at least by the time that we've seen these teams play. But yeah.
Yeah, and again, putting Carlton into the Good Friday appeal when they have that goal kicking thing, probably always a good move.
Oh yeah, especially
they always need to get one good offensive
Kerner and
team.
Mackay. Hopefully they're fit and firing.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where they like to make some of the bottom, give highlights to some of the bottom teams by giving them the Good Friday time slot. So
yeah.
But on the flip side, it doesn't do good for some of the goal tallies. I forgot it was that North versus St Kilda game where there was only one goal scored at halftime or something.
Yeah, that was a bit crazy. And then Easter Saturday is Melbourne Freo, Adelaide and the Giants, and then Richmond and the Suns. Then Easter Sunday is Sydney and Port Adelaide, and the Western Bulldogs and St Kilda. Then the traditional Easter Monday clash is Geelong and Hawthorn at the MCG.
Back to being a schedule filler. Oh, schedule filler? Calendar marked one game.
And again, after the way Hawthorn has played this past season, that's also going to be a banger of a match. It's going to definitely, granted, it is a traditional matchup anyway for Easter Monday, but now it's a more high-profile marquee game, I think, going into this season.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then next on the list is Anzac round at round 7. So the Anzac Eve game is Thursday, April 24th. So we actually get a long weekend, which is very nice. We don't have to, have Anzac and then go back to work for one day and then the weekend.
Yeah.
So obviously the traditional Anzac Eve clash between Melbourne and Richmond at the MCG, and then the traditional Anzac Day clashes between Collingwood and Essendon and Fremantle. And actually, that's technically not a traditional match, but Fremantle or West Coast normally get the second match because of time zones. Then St Kilda, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, North Melbourne, the Giants and the Doggies on the Saturday, and then the Suns and the Swans, Carlton and Geelong, and the Battle of the Birds, one of the Battles of the Birds being Hawthorn and West Coast on the Sunday.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I say one of because it's also Sydney and Adelaide.
Yeah.
Next on,
Uh,
is there anything else you want to mention?
no. Sorry, you go.
All right, next on the list is Sir Doug Nicholls rounds in round 10 and round 11. Um, Obviously, these are the Indigenous rounds, Dreamtime, stuff like that. So the matchups are to start the Suns and the Hawks up in Darwin. Then we've got Sydney and Carlton at the SCG, Collingwood and Adelaide at the MCG, Port Adelaide and Geelong at Adelaide Oval, Giants and Freo at NG Stadium, the Dogs and Essendon at Marvel Stadium, Richmond and North Melbourne at the MCG, Brisbane and Melbourne at the Gabba, and Richmond and North Melbourne. I think I said that correctly. Can't remember. Anyway, Brisbane and Melbourne at the Gabba, and then West Coast and St Kilda at Optus. Fun fact: the stretch between Anzac Eve and Dreamtime, Richmond get 5 MCG home games in a row, or 5 MCG games in a row. I think at least two of them might not be home games technically.
Must be nice.
To be fair, that so I'm just going to quickly show this. So we play Melbourne, obviously. That's an away game. It's Melbourne's home game for Anzac Eve. Then round 8, we play Hawthorn. Hawthorn's home game. Round 9, we play the Eagles, so that's a home game. Round 10, it's a home game against North. And then round 11 for Dreamtime, it's an away game against Essendon. But it's still 5 MCG games in a row, which is great.
Yeah, as I said, I think Richmond have a chance to put in some footholds this season. But again, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, it definitely helps for a young team to just have consecutive games at home rather than having to travel so much. Cough, cough, interstate teams. So just to continue on with the Sir Doug Nicholls rounds. The round 11 matchups are Geelong and the Doggies, Essendon and Richmond on the Friday night, not the traditional Saturday night, which I have some opinions about. On one hand, I think it's really cool that they're trying something different, but on the other hand, it kind of screws over like interstate fans that want to travel over or country fans who want to try and work the same day work and then travel to the game. On that hand, it's not very fair. It definitely favors more metropolitan fans like myself. And on that hand, I don't really like it. But on the other hand, I do like that it's something different and they're trying something different. So we'll see. When this game happens, I definitely want to match attendee records with previous Dreamtime games just to see whether it is a lot more favorable to keep it on the Friday night or whether it's better to go back to the Saturday. I'm going to put a pin on that until May comes around because I missed this season's Dreamtime. I was in Canada. Actually, I wasn't just in Canada. I was on my plane coming home.
Yeah, I remember that.
I missed it by like that much.
Yeah, because I remember telling you it was like, I remember it was actually all right. It wasn't that far apart. I thought Richmond did all right because I think I was still covering the games.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
And then
anyway, so
Saturday matchups are Carlton and the Giants, the Hawks and the Lions, North Melbourne and Collingwood, Freo and Port Adelaide. Then the Sunday matchups are Adelaide.
Point. I was going to say Freo and Port Adelaide, at least the two teams with pretty proud Indigenous history. So,
yes, very true.
At least two more linked clubs representing that.
For sure. And then another Battle of the Birds being Adelaide and West Coast on the Sunday, Melbourne and Sydney, and then St Kilda and the Gold Coast Suns at Marvel. Next on my list is the King's Birthday Clash in June. I did not write down what... Okay, I found it. Round 13. Perfect timing. So King's Birthday long weekend. This is also where the buys start to kick in. I think they start officially in round 12. Let me just double check that. Yes, they do. But I'm going to highlight round 13 specifically because it's the King's Birthday long weekend. So the Thursday night matchup is the Doggies versus Hawthorn. Friday night is Adelaide versus Brisbane. Saturday is Richmond v Sydney, Geelong v Gold Coast, and the Giants versus Port Adelaide in Canberra. Then the Sunday matchup is North Melbourne and West Coast in Bunbury, one of the two games that North Melbourne have sold to WA.
Oval. Woof.
And then Carlton and Essendon as the Sunday night clash. And then the traditional King's Birthday rivalry between Melbourne and Collingwood on Monday, June 9th.
Yep.
And for that week, St Kilda and Fremantle have their byes.
Yeah. And as said, again, pretty good weekend of football. But Melbourne Collingwood should be one of the more interesting things, because by that time of the season, we'll know a lot more about them. So.
And then I'm going to jump ahead to round 20, specifically because whilst we don't obviously know date and times for these games, this is the round where pretty much all of the state clashes, all the derbies, the showdowns, the Q Clash, and the Battle of the Bridge all happen at once. So Giants will host Sydney for theirs. There's also a traditional matchup between Richmond and Collingwood and Hawthorn and Carlton, which is interesting. Then the Suns host the Brisbane Lions. Adelaide will host Port Adelaide, but granted, same ground, doesn't matter. And then Freo will host West Coast at Optus, but again,
that's a bit of a different vibe.
Yeah.
The crowd's a bit of a different vibe.
Yeah, that's true, because it's more one side of the fans than the other. But
yeah, no, I know what you mean there.
But yeah, I kind of love when they do this, but I also kind of hate that they do this, because I think it would be really cool to try and actually go to all four matchups, because I want to experience what the crowds are like. Because
obviously they're double-headed, you still could.
But... Yeah, I know, but granted, Richmond, whilst we have our traditional rivalries, Carlton, Essendon, Collingwood, and the crowd atmosphere is great, I feel like the different state matchups are vastly different, and I want to see what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, look, especially, as I said, Port Adelaide and Adelaide, obviously bias aside, but from what I've gathered from the States, that's far more intense than even a West Coast Freo derby, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, I must admit, it's on my bucket list to go to a Adelaide Oval game. Go to a showdown at Adelaide Oval. But I would also like money. So
agreed. Also agreed.
Tough.
Then one last game that I want to specifically highlight is in round 23, and it's this game right here where North Melbourne will host Richmond for the very first time in Hobart.
Spoon Bowl!
It might be a spoon bowl by the end of the season. It might not be. We shall see. But the point of it being is that this is the first time that Richmond, as far as I'm aware, in the AFL era, has played an AFL official game in Hobart. Obviously, I don't think in the VFL era it would have happened anyway, because that's when everything was a lot more separate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's cool actually, because one, it gives me a reason to go to Tassie and watch an AFL game, because I did want to go to Tassie to watch a Hawthorn North matchup. But
yeah,
knowing that Richmond is going to play Tassie, I think it's just I can't pass that up.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, again, on the East Coast, it's a lot better. Yeah. Obviously, for me in the West, it's 2 flights and a lot of hours. But it's a good excuse to get in North Hobart, Tasmania.
Yeah, so. Sure. Because again, if we were going to play Hawthorn, we just play the MCG, you get a bigger crowd. Yeah. There is one more game that I want to highlight. I think it's in round... No, it's not in round 3. It is early in the season. I can't remember where I saw it, so don't mind me if I just skip through a little bit. But I wanted to point out... I can't remember where it is. It's Richmond Port Adelaide. I can't remember which round that's in.
Oh, yeah, that's not early.
Is it early, or is it later in the season?
Oh, I've got Port Adelaide's fixtures open. Never mind. I can look it up.
Find it for me.
It's the second round at Adelaide Oval.
Okay. There it is. Yes, thank you. I knew it was early, but I just couldn't remember which one. There you go. The Saturday matchup is our rivalry.
Yeah. Who gets to cover that game, Blazy?
Oh, I don't know. We'll have to talk about that when it comes down to it. Either that,
Yeah.
or if we somehow pull an amount of funds out of a hat and we both go somehow.
Sponsor us if anyone listening has a lot of money
If
and
anyone has a lot of
they
money and wants to
we'll do a live episode.
sponsor some
Exactly.
flights, I'm happy to buy the tickets. But if you want to sponsor the flights and accommodation, we will happily both go to the
Oh,
game.
yeah, exactly. Um, or
But
if you just want to give us money,
oh yeah,
I'm
we're not going to
happy
say
either
no to that
way.
either. But yes, yeah, we're both very excited for that I would say traditional matchup, our matchup,
Yeah,
our mini rivalry
exactly.
that we have. Um,
Yeah,
are there any other games that you specifically want to highlight?
yeah, really. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty. Like, yeah, as I said, I'm more looked at the early um, Port Adelaide fixturing, but yeah, no, I think that's good.
Right. Shall we move on to the women's games then?
Yes,
So,
yes, and
which game do
yeah,
you want to
yeah.
start with? I do have both open.
We'll get we'll go in order.
Cool.
Uh, and we talked about last week how, they booked Saturday games, two Saturday games. This one being at 12:35 p.m. in Adelaide, and it was an absolute stinker in sort of both regards. I must admit, I was caught off guard because it's been actually quite cool here in Perth, which is a bit unfortunate. If it was the other way around, it might have been an okay match, but 35 degrees in the middle of the day. It was absolutely tough conditions. Um, and yeah, Adelaide, obviously, as you can tell by the scoreboard, 7-7 to 1-6. Technically, Freo did better than last time. They were 0-6. So, yeah, but for a semi-final, they were pretty much blown out straight from the start. Not so much through lack of effort, but definitely through lack of class when you compare the two lists. They did okay in the first quarter, even got the early lead with a. Oh, sorry, no, they didn't get an early lead. Did they? I can't remember. They might have got with points, but yeah, but early on, you can tell some of the players, Madison Newman for Adelaide, really getting her hands on the ball. And of course, the one and only Ebony Marinoff, easily one of the best players on ground, 32 disposals, 12 tackles, 8 clearances, absolute mammoth of the game. A goal and a goal assist. So involved in a lot of scoring. And yeah, Freo just couldn't really get their hands on the ball. Honestly, their defense did all right until the game sort of went on. Players like O'Driscoll in the back line had a pretty good game. Ash Brazel did pretty good job. I think she was on uh, Gould, who, had a few marks, but was kept relatively quiet. But, as the match went on, especially in that second quarter where Adelaide were able to get 4 goals, um, you know, they just sort of blew them away. And in those hot conditions, it's sort of hard to build the energy to mount such a comeback. And yeah, they just couldn't do it. Adelaide very classy and sort of Freo, I guess, sort of hit a wall. And yeah, it was a bit of an ugly disposal. Sorry, not ugly disposals. Like, it was okay in some areas, but 46 inside 50s to 26. Freo were just sort of overwhelmed. Um, yeah, and obviously, I will like to give a shout out as well to the Adelaide ruck. What's her name? I gotta look at her hit up. Jessica Allen had a really good job, I thought, on Mim Strong. Mim Strong did have a few hitouts, but very limited. Essentially shutting down one of the best, if not the best, rock women in the league. And yeah, I'm not sure if there's too much more that really needs to be said about this game, because obviously it was quite a blowout. Danielle Ponta, I will say as well, had a very fantastic game. Chelsea Randall, such a class. And for Freo, the only goal scorer was Philippa Seth, who has actually had a pretty good final series considering. Is there another one? Um, Sort of Jessica Lowe in the back line. So, it wasn't that Freo were too spread on talent. It's just, a chunk of them got shut off, and especially in that midfield unit. It's funny because it's almost a bit like it bears a bit repeating in the men's as well as the women's. Is that while they're good at clearances, they're pretty good at clearances. Their midfield units get good stats, but defensively, it's just a bit off at the moment. And, a lot of that could be said, Kiara Bowers missing for the year. If you do want to make that parallel to the men's team, I'll say that's like missing Brayshaw for the start of the year, where it's not just you're missing a quality player, you're missing a very good defensive player, and it sort of helps that mesh where Newton, East, and Eiling, while all have been pretty good this year, just not quite been overall clean as a tight unit, especially since they have Mim Strong providing so much as well, just as like a ruckman in that midfield group. So, disappointing end to Freo season. I was hoping they would do a bit more, but obviously Adelaide's not a bit to scoff at. And as for Adelaide, this is sort of what they needed. Obviously, I thought heading into this, they were a bit, I wouldn't say shaky, but they definitely weren't getting as much as their team list, as much talent as their team list suggested they had. Not getting as much reward as their team list had. And this is a game where they're like, we are definitely a class above. And, as I said, they are well and truly capable of matching up against Brisbane, which we'll mention a bit later. But yeah, as I said, pretty great game by them. I think that's it. Yeah, I don't think there's too much to be said.
Well, in that case,
unfortunately, I didn't. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
no, go on.
I was gonna say I didn't actually get a chance to watch the game. Oh wait, I did mention that before, didn't I?
Yes, you did mention that before.
I have to listen to it on the radio. So, unfortunately, I didn't get to witness it, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. But what I did get to witness, Blazy, when I came back, sat on my little tush, put some football on, was not only one of the best AFLW finals games of all time, but just one of the best AFLW games.
Well, if you
and that was...
Hold your horses just for like 2 seconds.
Oh, come on. You were going to mention it. You were just about to lead me into it.
I was showing stats from the previous game, but now, now I am on the screen. You may go ahead.
Well, I mean, they know now. It's one of the best games. Hawthorn absolutely started off strong, against Port Adelaide. Weren't quite getting on the scoreboard. Actually, no, it was pretty even to start with. Never mind. I forgot that. And then, eventually, they were absolutely dominating the stats. That's right. And, I'll get Blazy will eventually go through the stats. But, a bit inaccurate, especially in that second quarter. They went from 2-3 to 3-8, where Port were keeping up with them 3-2. Then, as we mentioned, third quarter, Hawthorn kick away. Still not converting that well, but enough to really get a pretty dominant lead on a pretty tough night. Again, it was played at night, but it was still around 30 degrees at Icon Park. But the three-quarter time score was 5-12-42 to 3-2-20 Port Adelaide. And you thought, well, Hawthorn's, a top 4 team. We know that there was a bit of a bar between, the top 4 and the rest of the competition. You just sort of expect Port Adelaide to bow out of it. The commentators were actually gassing up Port a bit. They knew that they could score fast. So props to them. And what happened was like one of the best displays of not only forward attacking football by Port Adelaide, but honestly, as I said, sort of a lesson where we normally go, don't play too defensively. If you got the lead, the worst thing you can do is that. But this is actually an opposite case where Hawthorn were actually going forward a bit too much. They weren't converting too good. Port Adelaide for the whole night were only able to really attack off half back. And once they got that dominance in that quarter, they were turning unstoppable. and one of the heroes of the last quarter, and had an absolutely fantastic game all round. Abby Dowrick, 2 goals in the last quarter. As a midfielder, for those who don't know, I think she had like 19 disposals. Oh no, only 12 disposals. But 11 tackles, 8 clearances, sorry. And yeah, absolutely huge game. One of the best games I've seen her play. I think she was All-Australian last year. Close to it this year. The squad's out. We'll go through the All-Australian, what do you call it? The team itself next week, probably. I think that's when it's announced. But yeah, as I said, there's just a lot of players for Port Adelaide that had absolutely huge last quarters. Shania Goody, Matilda Scholes, again, like this, such a young team, seeing a 19-year-old kick to get Port Adelaide the lead in that last quarter. And they got the lead and then they lost it again, which, so they were able to then, as I said, get another goal to get back in front. It was pretty much, it was just such a fast-paced match.
Mm-hmm.
It was tied with about 2 minutes to go, I think, before Port Adelaide kicked a couple of behinds. Hawthorn also elected to rush a behind late as well, which I thought was interesting, which gave Port Adelaide the lead with only 2 minutes left. So there wasn't too much they could do at that point, but it was just interesting. And yeah, it was not only the I think it was the biggest 3/4 time comeback in the AFLW, and it happened in a final, and it was an absolutely terrific game.
That is incredibly thrilling and very, very hype for the AFLW as a whole.
Oh yeah, and I was talking, a bit in the Discord just about how insane these Hawthorn versus Port Adelaide matchups. I would sort of clear up a joke. I said it was the McClellan matchups, the McClellan Trophy of matchups, and what I meant by that is just like every game, in this Hawthorn versus Port was an absolute banger, because it's the only time they faced this season, and obviously the men's game, we all know what happened there.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely. In terms of that, it was absolutely great.
What I love is that it's actually both happened in semis. Like, that's the crazy thing.
Yeah, both happened in semis. And this is the other thing too, is the first time that, and I'm amazed at this stat, that 2 non-Victorian teams have both won in in the same tier of final.
That's crazy, actually.
Yeah. So, But in terms of Hawthorn, because I will say they were very dominant, Emily Bates, absolutely pure class. I will say their backline was very good. Tilly Lucas Rod, Tamara Smith, absolutely fantastic as always. But for Port, I actually got to give a lot of credit, because if you can go to the team stats for me, you'll see going through. All right, you can go through the disposals and some of that. Inside 50s, 51 to 29. I'm pretty sure Hawthorn almost equaled the most inside 50s in an AFLW game. And, Port were able to, for the most part, defend it pretty well. Players like Brooksby, who I think I mentioned before, O'Day was absolutely fantastic. Emily Borg, another one who's really... Oh, and Bo. I must admit, I get those 2 players mixed up because their names are so similar.
Oh, yeah. That's okay.
But I think at least combined, they had a very good game. And yeah, as I said, Goody before. And yeah, as I said, absolutely fantastic. And I don't know, I think you'll understand when I describe this, but there was a moment late as Port were coming back, Gemma Houghton, a player close to my heart, used to play for Freo, now plays for Port Adelaide. But this is very relatable. Everyone's had this sort of player in their team at one point. She takes the mark as they're coming back, but she has a rush of blood in the head, plays on, absolutely slams it into the post, and you think, oh no. And then Port are able to get the intercept back. They kick back to Houghton in the pocket, much harder angle, and she absolutely slots it. That's sort of the player that Gemma Houghton is. She's absolutely fantastic to watch, can be absolutely really dominant. And I will say Port's forwards were very good because despite the inside 50, I think it was 9 marks inside 50 to 8. So it was very even in that regard. And yeah, as I said, Jenna Houghton, absolutely fantastic. Kicked 2 goals too. And yeah, as I said, absolutely great game. I don't think there's any other players that I really wanted to mention too much. If you have a chance, watch the highlights because it's absolutely fantastic. Even when Port were out of it, I will say this is like the other great thing was it happened sort of like I was indicating it might happen last week. Like this was a very open game. It was very free flowing. And the passages of movement were quite good. There was enough open players, enough open space. So, this is sort of, and again, I think I mentioned this last week. It's not that these matches have to be the standard, but the AFLW will benefit greatly when these sort of matchups, you get 1 or 2 of these games every round, and you've got such an entertaining product. As I said, it was funny, all this sort of discussion about, the AFLW being a product and all the watchability.
Yeah.
I also thought it was a bit funny that then, what was it, like 2.6 million people tuned into Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson the day after. You know what I mean?
That was also
It's
2.6
just like,
million worldwide. Like that's
yeah, look,
that's not just like
but-
Australian statistics.
Yeah, no, but you know what I mean? It's just like, sometimes I feel a bit bad for women's sports because like sometimes there's like a standard where they have to perform up to it and then just like some pure garbage. And, I'm not going to talk too much about that. It was obviously like a cash grab sort of thing.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes you really just got to appreciate these results because it's worked off the back of, some harder fought, feet finding results to get up to this. And this was just like a very great organically built contest.
Yeah.
I say organically built. I think Hawthorn have had a bit of a luck in terms of the rebuild. In terms of their expansion team. But, it was absolutely great that Port, pretty even. A few players pinched off Adelaide, but they were, heading to the end of their careers. Were able to get one. And of course, even like Lauren Arnell, the coach, having the baby last year, coming into this season, with a team with like, what was it? Well, I think it was 2 wins and 2 draws for their entire AFLW career. So, maybe it was a bit more. It wasn't much. But yeah, they've like now won more games than they have in their entire AFL history, and have got 2 finals wins under their belt.
It's very
Absolutely
impressive.
amazing. Yeah, this was just so unexpected. We mentioned the chasm we thought, but the great thing is a fast attacking footy team produce such a thing. And yeah, as I said, there's a lot of exciting players to watch, and they're all very young. So, some of the players I mentioned before, I think Wenland, I think she's under 20 years old. Piper Window, I'm pretty sure, is still pretty young. Matilda Strolls, I said, amazingly still a teenager. And also a power couple. She is in a relationship with Abby Dowrick, who I mentioned earlier.
Damn,
who
that is
is
a power
22
couple.
years old. So, both in the midfield feeding off each other. Obviously being a Freo supporter, I watched a lot of the Antonios back when Cara Antonio, Cara Donlan used to be captain as well.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a new power couple to fill the void. I'm sure there's plenty more out there. But as I said, I don't exactly keep tabs on all of that sort of thing. But I always find it's one of those things where it's like both sort of cute and badass at the same time. When you can have like such a good, 2 players that are so good for you, but also in a relationship. So just feel good stories all around, I think.
Amen to that. All right, let's jump over now to the preliminary final fixture, which starts on both the Saturday games yet again. One being held here in Melbourne at Icon Park, and the other being held in Ipswich at Brighton Homes Arena. So North Melbourne will host Port Adelaide, and Brisbane will host the Adelaide Crows. So let's start with the North game. How do you see this matchup going?
Well, first off, scheduling. Like, I could understand last week, but I think it's pretty ridiculous to, again, have this game at 12:05 when it's scheduled to have 35-degree heat. Just make it a Friday game.
Yeah,
I just don't understand,
I agree.
especially since it is Icon. North Melbourne didn't have the best turn up, and even then, like Adelaide, they had a fairly low crowd for their game too. It was only about, I think it was 28,000, which was about the same as Icon Park, but Adelaide definitely are a crowd that can get to, the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Sorry, the 3s and 4s.
I knew what you
Not
meant.
quite
You're
that
good. Don't
high.
worry.
Yeah. So, even if you make the argument about, but yeah, anyway, I just think it's a bit ridiculous. Hopefully, they won't be too bad. And it's the same for both teams. But obviously, when a team's taken a week off, you know what I mean? It's just so much more of an advantage. And as mentioned before, this is the biggest test on just pure team list. You can face North Melbourne. I do think, obviously, Brisbane and Adelaide, with their history, are definitely teams that can rise to the occasion. But, Port Adelaide, they're just the pure wild card. After that performance against Hawthorn, you definitely can't say that they are out of it. They'll have full belief. There's no expectations. This is just basically a freebie, but like one of the best freebies you can get. But in terms of pure matchups, obviously the biggest thing will be Port's defense. They did very well against, I don't think Gilroy kicked the goal. I think, who was it? Bates kicked a couple. I think she was the only multiple goal scorer. Oh, not Bates. Bodie. That's the one. I think she plays in the midfield for Hawthorn. So, as I said, they kept the good tolls down, which, they're going to have to do again for North Melbourne with some of their players like Sheila or O'Loughlin, or even Talia Randall. But, with a mix, a couple of those are smaller. I think Randall's fairly small. Sheila's a taller target, and I think King's down there as well as a slightly taller target. So, I think Port Adelaide, again, have proven they've got a matchup to do well against it. But at the other end, they would like a bit more consistency. And I think, too, the midfield battle, you saw against Hawthorn, when Port Adelaide were losing the midfield battle, they were finding it very tough. But the moments where they could assert control in the midfield, they were very competitive. They got their game plan going against one of the top teams in the competition. Hawthorn obviously finished second in the regular season. So, there's no reason to think why they can't at least have periods of times where they do that against North. And again, with that defensive matchup, they have that belief that they'll at least execute with them for parts of the game. Hopefully, for the whole game. But I do think this is probably where they fall short because North Melbourne's just a stacked team. Don't always convert that well. I guess that's the other avenue to where they could compete. But you still have to really respect, and especially that midfield unit. Jasmine Garner, is really, really solid. There's another one I'm forgetting, but they've really got their stuff cut out for them, and it'll be very interesting to see because they'll be full of belief. But I think most people tipping would definitely still go North, especially the fact it's at Icon Park.
Yep.
But interesting because they kind of stayed there because obviously a lot of the players have had part-time jobs. But it'll be interesting to see if Port Adelaide, who have played a lot of games this season at Icon Park, might actually not mind that too much. As I said, like on paper, there's a lot of things going for North, and you would think that, but it's not just this run of momentum. They're still undefeated for the last 8 rounds, Port Adelaide. So, but there's a lot of tiny things that are edging to say that, I don't think this will be a blowout. I think there just might be a point where North Melbourne take control of this game and come away with another finals appearance.
Sounds Pretty good. At least we know it's going to be a very, very interesting matchup. Like, again, Port have this momentum from all of the games that they've won in a row. It's actually very beneficial to this sort of playing group to be able to have that consistency. With North, they had the week off, so they're better, well rested. Probably have probably a little bit more energy to go into this game. To make it a really tough matchup for Port to try and stop their momentum in its tracks. But hopefully the weather won't be too bad. It is at 3 p.m. rather than at noon, so hopefully it won't be too bad weather-wise. But yeah,
sorry, I said 12
Yeah,
p.m.
you did.
I said 12 because of our time, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But it's like one match going into the other. It's, again, scheduling wise, it is a little bit weird. I agree it should have been just Friday night, Saturday night, but it's what it is. But
Also, the other downside for Port is that earlier they played it. I don't think it was Archon Park. It was Whitten Oval.
Oh yeah.
They lost 6-6 to 1 goal. So again, at the earlier part of the season where they were still trying their foot, but again, as I said, on paper you have to go North, but the belief is there, and there's definitely a lot to like about the way Port's playing. So even if it is just naive optimism, I've got no problem believing that this will be a close contest, and I hope Port really put them to the sword.
Sounds good. All right. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to at least watch one of these. I am going out Saturday, so I don't know if I'll be home for at least the first one. But I would love to.
That's the other downside, I think, of the doubleheader as well on Saturday.
Yeah,
a lot of people are generally going to miss one.
Yeah, a lot of people are usually busy on the Saturdays, which makes a lot of sense. But all right, let's move on to the next matchup with Brisbane v Adelaide in Ipswich at Brighton Homes Arena.
Yeah, and as I said, it's one of the most ridiculous things where there still hasn't been a grand final without one of these two teams. So it's locked in that it'll happen again. They've had a recent encounter this year, much closer than the one, before we were talking about with Port Adelaide and North Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the same place. It was in Brisbane. What was it? Like People's...
Ipswich.
No, Brighton Homes
Arena.
5-5 to 5-3, 35 to 33. And I think we'll see a similar sort of scoreline. All these games have been pretty much nail-biters. Sort of similar to, again, Adelaide and North Melbourne. All their games tend to be close.
Mm-hmm.
Brisbane, obviously, having that nail-biting win to get them into the grand finals last year. No, sorry, it wasn't. It was in the first week of the final, sorry. It was a qualifier. What was I going to say? Yeah, Brisbane's got the recent wood over Adelaide, but they've all been pretty close. Brisbane nearly full strength. Adelaide nearly full strength, but they've had to play a stinker of a match. They probably were a bit lucky that they were able to not so much put their feet up, but manage their rotations because they had that game well in the bag. But yeah, it's going to be one of those games where, the interesting thing will be, again, sort of which offense converts, because both have good teams offensively. You've got Smith and Davidson for Brisbane, and Gould and Ponta for Adelaide, who are very good at scoring. Brisbane also have a bit more depth with Conway, Farrick, and what's her name? Courtney Hodder, all very influential in the forward line.
Mm-hmm.
But Adelaide's defended pretty well this final series. Maybe able to hold that back, especially players like Chelsea Randall. And as I said, the midfield battle, Chelsea Marinoff, Madison Newman, should go really well against some of Brisbane's players. I do think that, again, it's hard because, as I said, I haven't watched as many Brisbane games this year, but I think both teams are pretty much runs out the middle to a very high, potent offense. So yeah, it'll be pretty interesting. obviously, I don't think this team are separating. I couldn't even give you much more than a 55, 45. And I guess I'll just give it to Brisbane because I feel like I've been hating on them, but like, because I haven't watched them as much, I don't think I've been giving enough credit. So I'll take Brisbane for the win. Go back to back, defend their title. But yeah, pretty much just as well could be Adelaide, who I thought were very, very strong last week in a week where they probably needed to be to prove that they could take it up to Brisbane. And yeah, I think this will be the game to watch. You know, I know like the other game should be absolutely fantastic, but just the history of these two teams going together, you know, it's hard to believe that it wouldn't be an absolute cracker. And yeah, as I said, you know, it's just amazing that again one of these two teams will go. And despite that, it'll be the first time if Brisbane go on to win it all, that a team would go back to back in the AFLW. So despite, you know, it often favouring these two teams, as I said, Adelaide's won 3, Brisbane's won 2. No team's gone back to back. So that'll be something that Brisbane will want for themselves as well.
Yeah, it'd be nice to like officially put that stamp in the history books of like the first AFLW team to go back to back.
I will say Brisbane's been on the other end where they've lost, I think, 3 in a row. Was it 3 or I think it was 3 in 4 years. I think that was it.
I believe we talked about it last week, but if you want to just double check that once more.
Yeah, no, it was 3 in 4 years because it would also make sense for, you know, obviously us being there sort of thing as well.
Yes, of course, of course.
Yeah, because otherwise there's no way that they could have won 2 finals, so... Or, sorry, 2 premierships.
True.
But yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, as I said, it's shaping up to be quite the interesting finish. 3 teams we thought would be here. 1 team that's, you know, weren't expecting, but they're definitely not, you know, they definitely got all the belief. Like, they're as exciting as, like, a Hawthorn were in that final series in the men's, you know what I mean? Or, I don't know, maybe GWS 2 years ago when they... you know, bounce back from the sellers. So, yeah, it'll be a treat to watch, hopefully.
It'll be an absolute thriller for a weekend. But yeah, if there isn't anything else you would like to touch on,
I think we're good.
We shall wrap it up here for the week. So thank you all so much for coming to hang out, coming to listen, just coming to vibe with us this week. Again, I'm still raising money for Movember all through the next 2 weeks. So please go if you have any spare money and would like to donate, please go scan the QR code or links down in the description for the videos and all the social posts as well. I'm also streaming most days the next 2 weeks as well. Currently my schedule is like Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and probably Sunday. At least for this week, and then next week probably something similar. But again, I'll keep you all posted on my socials. Usually my Instagram is the best place to go for that. Or just my Twitch channel directly. We should be back next week for the draft, because I believe the draft is this weekend. And then obviously the rundown of the preliminary finals of the women's game and the grand final preview as well. And any other little tidbits of news that pop up throughout the week. I'm sure there'll be something mentioned.
I think the draft is actually next Tuesday.
Oh, is it? I thought it was on the weekend.
I think... No, it's definitely on a weekday. But yeah, so it'll probably be AFLW and plus whatever murmurings come out from the draft. And then the AFL finals recap and the draft.
All right.
So we probably should have 2 weeks of content.
Possibly.
Yes.
Unless we move our recording day next week to the Tuesday. But that's remains to be seen. Depends on like timings and stuff. Well, we shall see. But yes, thank you all so much, and hopefully you all have a great week and a great weekend. If you're going to these AFLW games or watching them, hope you enjoy them. If your team is playing, may your team win. Otherwise, commiserations if your team loses. And we will hopefully see you all next week for episode 38 of the Coast AFL Podcast. So until then, we'll catch you later. Goodbye.